Welcome everyone to another series of our Global Employability Expert Series. This is brought by Virtual Internships, and I'm Mirta Aguirre, the head of employability, and I'm going to be your host as usual. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited that you are here, especially, and of course our guest speaker is here, Ary. So let's discover a little bit what our webinar today is going to be about. So basically, so what do consultants do anyway, right? This is a very interesting question that Ary Cunha will let us know all about it, okay? But before jumping into our topic today, we are going to remember how our webinar works, okay? So we are recording this session, so you can watch it later on again, or you can share it with other people you may know that may be interested in watching this. You can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. So remember, we have a YouTube channel, and whenever we have a new episode uploaded, it can notify you automatically. So it's good to subscribe. And we hope you have many questions for our speakers, so you can use the Q&A option you can find below. You also have the chat if you want to comment anything as you speak, as our speaker speaks. So feel free to really participate and ask many questions, so it's funnier for our speaker. And if you have any question specifically about your program, please reach out to your IEM, who is a person who has been in contact with you all this time. Okay, so excellent. So without further ado, let's meet our speaker, okay? So Ary has long been a social and public sector nerd. He works as a management consultant at McKinsey Company, serving governments on economic development topics. He studied law, economics, and public policy, and before consulting, he worked as a university lecturer and researcher on public law and policy. Okay, so this is going to be very interesting. And Ary, in today's webinar, we will learn about what the work of a consultant is, what McKinsey, one of the biggest consultancy firms in the world, does, what skills and knowledge you need to become a consultant, and much more, okay? So take advantage of our speaker, ask many questions. I think this is a great opportunity to discover what this very well-known firm does, and what someone who works inside can tell us about it. So thank you very much, Ary, for being here today. I'm very happy to have you here. So you can share your screen now. Yeah, I have given you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Mirta, for having me. It's great to be here. Let me see if I can share my. I was being able to share screen, but somehow.
Yeah, you just we were just seeing it.
Yeah, let me see if that works again. Okay, sorry. Want to consultant. For some reason, it is not allowing me.
Yes, it's hard.
Okay, so
excellent.
After some initial hiccups, welcome everyone. It's great to be here. Really excited to talk a bit about consulting and share with you my experience. I think that consulting is not one of these things that kids grow up saying, I want to be a consultant. They want to be doctors, nurses, astronauts, football players. Nowadays, I guess influencers and YouTubers and whatnot, but not really consultants. And that's natural. It's not a profession that has been around for very long. It's been around in one way or another first, but especially it's a very nerdy sort of thing. Yet while kids don't seem to be big fans of being consultants, adults seem to be very keen on being consultants. Just last year, McKinsey received over 1 million applications for I think 10,000 places or something like that. So there's really a lot of excitement, at least among some some people for consulting. But I suspect that even out of the people that do apply, there's a lot of people that don't know that much about consulting itself. Consulting firms tend to be a bit private, not share a lot about what they do, because they serve companies, and most of companies that talk to other companies don't really have a big incentive to talk with a wider public about their products or advertise their products and services in a way that, let's say, Coca-Cola or Pepsi do, right? So I think that that's part of the reason people don't know consulting. If you are interested in consulting, this might be a good moment to reflect a bit on whether this would fit the kind of work that you would do. And you are in a moment in life that you can make these choices. So what do consultants do? Consultants, and particularly management consultants, that's what I'm going to talk about, because there are different types of consulting, like IT consulting or architectural consulting or tax consulting. These are a bit different. But management consultants, what they do is they help organizations solve problems by providing advice and facilitating change. And let's talk a bit about these different dimensions of what I've just said. Let's unpack it a bit. So how do consultants provide advice? So it all starts with companies coming to a problem. And consultants sit down with these companies or other organizations. So me particularly, I work a lot with government entities and social sector organizations. But most consultants do more work with private sector companies than with public and social sector ones. But anyway, these organizations come to consultants with a problem. And the first thing that consultants do is help them define the problem. So make sure that we're solving the right one. This could be something as we have our problem could be as a Ministry of Education that we have high youth unemployment. Or it might be as a company that our operations in Guatemala are not performing well, or it could be that our factories in China are not producing enough, let's say, some sort of gizmo that company produces, or it can be anything in between these different things. We'll tell more about the different kinds of problems that consulting companies can help organizations solve. First, we need to understand exactly what we are solving. And the second part is to structure the problem. Most problems are generally driven by many different things. There are many reasons why there's high student unemployment. There's many reasons why we cannot produce enough gizmos in our factories in China. Many reasons why our operations in Guatemala might be failing. But typically, not all of these reasons are equally important. And so it's worth focusing on the most important ones. And that's what we are trying to understand. Out of all of the possibilities of the things that could be going wrong, what is most likely to be going wrong? What are the things most likely to be driving most of the problem? And then we do this exercise of prioritization, and we plan our analysis. Now that we have zoomed in on some problems, we look deeply at those problems and we collect data. After this planning, we collect data. We then conduct analysis. This could be, part of it is data, part of it could be interviews, part of it could be research in terms of going through the academic literature for a certain area. Part of it could be talking to experts, and seeing what they are doing and what other companies are doing. And so we collectively look at these different sources of input. And then we synthesize our findings and develop recommendations based on these findings. I think that there was someone raising their hand, right?
Yeah. I was just writing that whoever raised their hand, they can write the question in the chat on the Q&A. Yeah, and then we can answer it.
Yeah. So this flow essentially allows consultants to have a systematic way of approaching problems. This is a McKinsey framework, but I'm sure that other consulting firms use a very similar one in the way that they serve clients. So while we don't have our questions, I'll probably ask for questions. I've been talking for a bit. Any questions so far? More than that, ask me questions so far. I'll probably take 2 questions at this point if someone writes them.
Yeah, what questions we have from the audience? Ary, where are you located at the moment?
Yeah, so right now I'm based in Dubai, but I'm working out of Saudi Arabia. So I'm in Riyadh right now. I think that we have some people from Saudi Arabia as well.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so we have a question. So in a sentence, what do they do? I think that that's this sentence. They help organizations solve problems by providing advice and facilitating change. And we have just covered, how do they do this? How do they provide advice? How do they make sure that the advice that they are providing is sound? And we'll tell you a bit more about how do they facilitate change. What does this mean?
Excellent.
Okay, let's talk a bit about facilitating change then. So for a very long time, consulting used to be about providing advice, just providing advice. Companies would come to them and they'd ask, so what should we do? We have this problem, how do we solve this problem? And consultants would come up with a theoretical answer, right? They'd come up with a set of recommendations, and the work of consulting would stop then. I think that in the past, let's say like 20 years or so, consulting has become a lot more about facilitating change. So what does this mean? It means taking the recommendations and helping the clients implement those recommendations. So how do consultants do this? First of all, they co-develop a detailed plan. They say, look, we need, in order for us to do 1, 2, 3, we need to concretely, what does this mean? This means, for example, when we're talking about tackling youth unemployment, if one of the things is setting up a council where people from the education side and people from the employers and unions and whatever can come together. If part of this is creating this council, how do we create this council? What is the budget for this council? What is the law that governs this council? What are the people that are going to be invited to be on this council? Where is this council going to meet? From all of these different things. So we go from these high-level recommendations of set up a council to really how do you make it happen? Once you have a plan, then you announce the plan to the organization or to the country if it's the case, and all the supporting initiatives behind it. So the recommendations will go from from like these 5 things that you need to do, often to hundreds of different initiatives the things that need to happen, of activities that need to happen for the plan to become a reality. And then you build capabilities and engage with initiative owners. So different people, often within the organization, different departments, for example, will be responsible for different parts of the plan, for different initiatives. So it's important that each person knows exactly what they need to do. And they also need to have the capabilities to do it, because otherwise people can very easily just say, well, I would love for me to change the way that I sell my gizmos, for example, in Guatemala, right? So I would love to do that, but I need training on how to sell to clients. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to adopt the new sort of like sailing philosophy that we want to implement, or the new approach. That capability building is increasingly, I would say, a very important part of how consultants can facilitate change. And after that, we track progress. Every initiative Quantitative has deadlines and we measure how the organization is doing. How are we doing against our plan? And over time, we identify bottlenecks and shortcomings. There are some initiatives that are going to be delayed. There are certain initiatives that are not, even if they're not delayed, right? They're not having the impact that we expect them to have. And so we look into that and develop ways to address these bottlenecks, to address these shortcomings. And then we adjust the plan. Any plan needs to be adjusted. Plans are living documents. They require constant adaptation to reality. And so there's a iterative process of adapting to the plan. I see that we have some questions.
Yeah, I think probably you are going to talk about this a little bit later, right?
Yeah.
What qualifications we need, and yeah, someone is curious about how much money consultants earn. But yeah, I don't want to disrupt the flow of your presentation, so I don't
honestly,
know.
I don't think we have covered now what do consultants do. I'll go back to this question then a bit later.
Yeah.
Now let me cover like what does this mean in like specifically, right? Because what I've just told you is sort of like the generic idea, and each project is going to be different, but they're going to be different in two main ways. They're going to be in different industries, and they're going to be under different functions. That is probably the most important sort of breakdown. So, for example, you can have a project of operations in financial services. So this could be something like we need to be able to respond to credit card fraud faster. We are taking too long. We have too many resources dedicated to this. How do we make sure that we have a smooth process to taking all of these fraud claims and address them in a fair and efficient way? Or it could be a marketing sales project for agriculture. For example, what is the price at which we should sell our agricultural products? Or it could be, I don't know, a travel and logistics finance project. For example, if you are a aviation company, how do I buy the planes that I fly, or do I rent the planes, or I lease out the planes that I fly with? Or it could be a people project on a real estate company. So we could say a real estate company often has a bunch of sales people. Do we keep these people, do we outsource the sale of these real estate projects, of our real estate projects, to companies that specialize on selling them? Or do we keep our own real estate agents and our sales force? And if we do, how do we incentivize people to do the best that they can at this job? How do we retain the best talent, etc.? That would be sort of an example of a real estate people problem. Or it could be digital in mining and in metal. How do we digitize our mining operation? How do we make sure that we are taking advantage of all of this data, that we have better drilling, so that if we are doing some, I don't know, fracking, that we minimize the amount of leakage and harm to the environment that comes from that? Or, for example, how do you automate some of these processes? A lot of mines nowadays, if you see these big trucks that operate in certain mines, they're fully automated. There's no one inside those trucks. So this could be also something that we could do. M&A is mergers and acquisitions, stands for mergers and acquisitions, and it is essentially about how do we merge two companies. So that could be, what is the price? For example, if we're a consumer's good company, what is the price as, let's say, if you are a pharma company? There's a smaller pharma company that has a very exciting new drug. How much should we pay for that company if we want to acquire them, so that we have access not just perhaps to this drug, but also to the amazing scientists that have developed this and might develop new innovations for us in the future? How much should we pay for that? That is a question that we might answer that. And then sustainability. I think that this is increasingly, it's something that probably has come along more, let's say, in the past. I'm good, thank you. In the past 5 years or so, it used to be a very niche thing, but I think that only in the last year, McKinsey has done something like 1,000 projects on sustainability. And this could be across, right? It could be, for example, in public sector, how do we meet net zero targets? What does this mean? What sort of regulation should be in place so that we more easily achieve this? So as you can see, consultants can work in many different projects. They can solve many different kinds of problems. Now, will they be the same consultants? Not necessarily. Probably the young people on a team are usually generalists. So there are people that might be doing financial services for a couple of months and then go to work in consumer goods for a few other months. But as you grow within a certain consulting company, you typically specialize more and more, right? So you might start doing financial services, and then you do a bit of everything in financial services, but then after a few years, you decide that you want to specialize in is doing marketing and sales in financial services. And even after a while, you might be focusing even on some subsection of that, depending on what the clients also ask from you, right? And your preferences to also a certain extent. I know some people that, for example, started their careers in telecommunications and then decided, look, I think that there's a big opportunity in this market to develop our public sector practice. And they became public sector experts by doing some projects with other people that knew a lot about these subjects. Cool. So this a bit more about than McKinsey, and I'll make a very, very, very important caveat at this point, which is I'm not representing McKinsey in any capacity whatsoever. And so I'm not the best person to answer some of the questions that you might have about McKinsey in this place or McKinsey in that place, because McKinsey is a large company and we obviously don't know everything that is going on, at least to the level of depth that you probably would require in order to also be satisfied with some of those answers. What I can talk to you about is a bit my experience. But Mirta gave me the challenge to talk a bit about McKinsey. So like here I go with some general level
because,
view of things.
as I was telling Ary before we started, like I've always heard of McKinsey as this very important consultancy firm, right? And so I've been curious at a certain moment myself to apply to McKinsey. And then I said like, this sounds like a big challenge. And I never did it. So I'm very curious to understand better what McKinsey does and yeah, how can one potentially work there? Then you will tell us. Yes.
No, absolutely. I think my answer to that is I think that McKinsey does a lot of different things. Does essentially all of the things that we were just discussing previously, all of these different functions and industries, McKinsey covers them all. Not all consultancies cover all of these things, and they often specialize in ones or others. I'm sure that we are also better in some of these dimensions and in others, so these things are often hard to compare. But as I was saying, what I can tell you about McKinsey is sort of like from my personal experience, not to go much beyond that. But from things that you can probably see on McKinsey's website, here are some facts, sort of like fast facts about. I think that what McKinsey does is we provide advice and facilitate change, like all of the other consulting companies, though some focus more on providing advice and some focus more on facilitating change. In this area, we serve 70% of Fortune 100 companies on strategy topics, and we have done over 1,000 transformations in 94 countries and 30 industries. And we do this by leveraging deep knowledge. So we invest a lot of money, $850 million every year on knowledge development, capability building, and learning. There's more than 50 hours on average there's more than 50 hours of training every year for each consultant at McKinsey, and for some people, way more than to contribute to sustainable inclusive growth. So we've talked a bit about the element of providing advice, facilitating change, also the sort of investments in knowledge and capability building that we have. In terms of a global reach, we are present in 65 countries, and we do projects in a lot more. And we have offices in 130 cities, and we have about 20,000 consultants with 140 different nationalities. And what we try to do, our aspiration is to contribute to sustainable inclusive growth. In terms of sustainability, one example is that we had just in 2021, 1,200 projects helping clients on climate transition topics. In terms of inclusive growth, we think that a key part of that is the capability building programs that we do. We have trained in 2021 alone 130,000 people, of which 20,000 was through a program designed or targeted to minority leaders to make sure that they have the soft skills to rise through the ranks and achieve greater leadership positions within their organizations. And they came from 600 different organizations around the world. And also in 2021, there's 190 million US dollars spent supporting almost 4,000 different NGOs globally. So this is part of the impact that I think that we have. I think that each service line, each industry will be able to claim impact in different areas. And I think that one of the key reasons I work mostly with public and social sector entities is that allows for what I personally view as the most meaningful. So some of the most meaningful work that we do. But if you probably speak with our colleagues from banking, they'll tell you very excitedly that they serve a very important function, helping clients allocate capital to deserving projects, make sure that there's that those clients of the banks then can support economic growth around the world and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different work in different industries that we do that we I think that create positive impacts in the world.
Awesome.
So this is a bit what we do as McKinsey. I think that we can then go to the next page and talk a bit about if consulting is something that is for you. And I think that I promised you that I would help you think through a bit of this choice.
Ary, first, before you jump into this, someone was asking, right? What qualifications and skills do we need to be a consultant?
To be very honest, relatively few. At this point, we do ask people to, or very few and high, because you can be a consultant pretty much with any background. I've known people that have a background in English literature and in music and in philosophy and medicine, in architecture, and law, beyond the more traditional ones, which are probably economics, business administration, engineering, etc. Right now, I'm working with a theoretical physicist that worked in CERN before joining consulting. So there's really no set of previous experience that works as a cutoff for you that says only if you do this sort of major can you be a consultant. Now, the flip side of this is that the sort of academic qualifications that are required to become a consultant are typically very high. So it is quite hard for you to become a consultant, at least immediately after university, if you don't have very good grades, if you don't come from what is perceived, at least in your country, as a prestigious institution, and sometimes that happens, but you need often to have other sets of qualifications, of extracurriculars, for example, of work experience, etc.,
that sort of compensate for that and say to consulting firms that you are someone that we should give an interview to, essentially, right?
Thank you.
This doesn't mean that people that don't have this sort of very high caliber academic background could not make it into consulting. There's lots of consultants that have joined other firms and that at these other firms have proven to be extraordinary employees, that have proven their capacities in some other way, and through that they have become consultants. I think that consulting is becoming that people from consulting are coming from more and more from these diverse backgrounds, and the sort of roles that we have are also getting more diverse. But at least for now, you probably need a very strong academic background, regardless of the area. Though some areas like economics, engineering probably prepare you for more of the challenges that we face, which tend to be more quantitative in nature as well.
Yeah, and we were also wondering what skills you required to be a good at consultant, right? I thought of time management, because I imagine you must have a lot of work and you need to allocate different time, and also project management skills. What else? What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So
the
I think
top 5 skills that a consultant need are, for instance.
Okay. So I think that problem-solving skills are quite important, essentially, and these are essentially analysis skills. If you're able to look at the problem, understand how to break down this problem into smaller ones, understand what might be the main drivers of this problem. If you can sort of do this exercise or have this sort of thinking, then that's something that would be really valuable. Second one would be communication skills. So if you are able to communicate with others in a concise, articulate manner, that really helps both in writing when it comes to doing slides or writing text, but also when making presentations. So that's also something that you should probably work on if you want to become a consultant. Thirdly, I would say that your people skills in general are also quite important. So if you are someone who engages, who would have ease establishing relationships with other team members, establishing relationships with clients, that would be fantastic. And if you add to that some leadership skills, if you are someone who is able to inspire others that provides coaching to others, that supports others in their careers and developments, that enjoys coaching others, that would certainly be very auspicious, at least for your career as a consultant. And then finally, I would say that some level of quantitative skills, so some essentially, I often describe this as being very good at 6th grade math. If you are good at very basic math, then that is also important. Having some familiarity with numbers and how to play with them. It doesn't need to be that you're very good at solving doing some calculus or integratives or whatnot, but you need to be good at the basic stuff and have an instinctive feel for numbers, often to spot if something is wrong, for example, in some calculations. I think that's also quite important.
Yeah, you have the 5 skills consultants need. Thank you.
Fantastic. So is consulting something for you? I think that there's pros and cons for consulting, as for any career, and I've tried to come up with a list that sort of feels fair in terms of what are the pros and cons. First one on the pro side is that you have a potential for large-scale impact. Projects that McKinsey often does, and other consulting firms as well, often imply changing profoundly how companies operate, and these companies themselves, by their sheer scale, affect a lot of the ways, a lot of lives of employees, of customers, of investors, and so on. So projects often have a large scale, and so you have opportunity to make an impact. The cons of this is that you have a very indirect sort of contribution. I used to be in academia before, and as a professor, you were teaching a class, and you could sense how your students would grow over time. You could see that the feedback that you gave them with one assignment would be incorporated in the next assignment, that they would gradually improve, and you'd feel good because you'd feel like, look, I'm contributing towards this. When you're doing a large-scale transformation at a company, or when you're devising a strategy for a country or a region or a city or something like that, your impact can only be very indirect. It's you, but it's also hundreds, if not thousands of people contributing to the impact that you're having. So you feel less personally, a bit more indirect and impersonal attachment to the sort of impact that you have. It depends on whether you prefer to have large scale indirect impact or smaller scale direct impact. Then second pro is that you have accelerated learning opportunities. So you'll be constantly learning new things, particularly in the beginning as you're thrown around between projects in different industries, and even within the same industry in different different problems, essentially. So so that's great because you'll keep on learning. The flip side of this is that you have a pressure to be constantly improving. It's a high pressure environment in which you're expected to every project you doing better than on your previous project. Your slides need to be sharper. Your ability to engage with clients and to create relationships with clients needs to be better. You need to communicate better with those clients, etc. So this pressure to constantly be better can also be a bit overwhelming. Third thing, or third pro, is that you have competitive compensation and perks. I think that at least if you compare to your average wage, even an average wage in professional services, management consultants have a compensation that is above average. The flip side of this is that you work very long hours. I think that obviously they depend from company to company and project to project, but they would certainly be above what most jobs typically demand. Fourthly, there's a global reach and opportunities to travel. The flip side of this is that you often need to commute very long for certain projects. It's not uncommon, for example, for you to fly every week from wherever you are based, 2,000, 3,000 kilometers to somewhere else, and that also takes a toll on you if you dislike commuting and want to be more closer to your friends and family for most of the week, etc. Finally, you get to work with diverse teams and interesting colleagues. But the flip side of this is that you need to constantly adapt to these new teams and colleagues. And so that can be a challenge, especially if you're more introverted, less sociable. That certainly would be something that would take a toll. But even if you're not, different people have different working styles. They expect different things from you. And so needing to adapt is always keeps you a bit on your toes and can be an added level of stress to what is already a bit of a stressful job. So I think that if you give a hard look at these pros and cons, and you feel like these pros are something that you really wish for, and these cons are something that you're willing to trade, maybe consulting is something that you could and should consider.
This is so great. I'm looking at this. I'm very exciting. I think I would like to be a consultant. I really like the pros. And this covers some of the questions that we had, because somebody had asked about the salary. Well, we don't ask you to tell us how much you earn, but from what you've said, we understand that it is a well-paid job, right?
Yeah, and I think that it's typically even better paid at the higher echelons, right? So all of this information is both very confidential within each firm. We legally cannot share this sort of information often, but it's on our contracts. But
course.
but on the flip side of this is that you have online services like Glassdoor, for example, that can at least give you a bit of a perspective of what you should expect from different companies.
That's a good tip for our audience. Glassdoor is an online portal where you can find different jobs, and there you can compare more or less how much each industry role is paid. So that's a good one. And also someone had asked, what about work-life balance? I think that also maybe from what we see, that may be something to work on, the challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Once again, this depends a bit on there's some industry level statistics on this. I think that at least in the US, your average consultant probably has somewhere in between like 60 and some 60 hours per week in some companies, up to almost 80 hours per week in other companies. So it's a challenging work-life balance for sure.
Yeah, well, a trade-off, right? Because if we like what we do and the challenge, and as you described, like being challenged all the time, then we may do this very
Of course,
willingly, right?
and lots of people also do it for a relatively short period of time and then decide to go to do something else. And that's something that at least at McKinsey we're very open about. Not everyone here is going to be a partner or would want to be a partner. A lot of people would just want to have the experience, learn new things fast, accelerate their careers in the beginning, and make sure that they get perhaps more stable opportunities once they have a bit more. Or they have also when they get like family responsibilities and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. And do you get to work remotely?
Depends on the companies. Some companies are currently working remotely.
Depends on the client you're working with.
Depends exactly. It depends on the client, but it also depends on the company. So some companies have a stronger remote work policy than others. But this also depends a lot on the client and what the client is asking, and on the kind of project. So if you're doing capability building, you're more likely to be on the ground than if you're doing just, let's say, pure strategy.
So I guess that also traveling depends on the type of projects you have, right?
Yeah, and also on your location. So if you're going to certain locations have more of a tendency to demand remote work than others, depending on the amount of clients that you have at those locations.
Awesome. So do we have any more questions before we wrap up from the audience? We're taking 5 more minutes just to wrap up properly. But if you have any more questions, please share them. And Ary, I don't know if you want me to go to our next slide or if you want to.
No, the next slide was just questions and answers. So I think that it should be okay.
Excellent. Well, I think this, what you have just shared is very insightful, right? To really think if consultancy is a career we may want to pursue. As I mentioned, I did know about a little bit about consultancy. I personally find very attractive this idea of always learning, right? And I think this might be a super great exercise to always being sharpening different skills and learning, right? And as a career experience, then I think it gives you a really interesting ground set of skills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll probably see former consultants in a lot of different fields, and many, for example, starting their own companies, for example, after a while in consulting. Or in the respective industries that they work with, because they have learned important skills in the network in those industries. So absolutely.
Excellent. Well, I think that if we don't have any more questions from the audience, we can just wrap up. And I'm going to share Ary's information. You can find him on LinkedIn. So you can, are you seeing my screen there? You can find him and be in touch with him if you have any further questions about what consultancy is, about McKinsey, why not? And also remember that as part of your program, we have 2 coaching calls that are included in your program. So if you have received an invitation to book this coaching call and you haven't taken it, take it, because this is the opportunity for you to speak with a trained coach about your next career steps, about how your internship is going and how you can maximize, boost your internship experience. And definitely, we hope that this was interesting for you, that it was as interesting to you. We have just one last question that I want to do, because someone is asking, how do we prepare for the McKinsey's assessment game? Because we've heard that applications on McKinsey are quite challenging, right?
Yeah, so this is a bit of 2 different, there are 2 different parts of this. So one is McKinsey now starts their application process with a literal game. It's like a video game. You can find some information on this online. But the purpose of this game is precisely for you not to be able to prepare for it. This is a bit the issue. If I'm being very transparent here. There's an entire industry of people that often former consultants who will ask you for money to coach you for your internship at McKinsey. And we are not, or at least I am not, saying that you should or that you shouldn't get their services. But one thing that we notice is that this was creating some disparities in terms of outcomes. People that have money and that have money to ask for these coaches and so on were getting in, while people that didn't have access to this were not. And so one of the ways in which we tried to make sure that we got the best candidates, not the candidates with the most money to pay for coaches, was to develop this game. And this game is hard to replicate as a training, much harder to replicate than some of the earlier tests that we did before. And so, yeah, the idea is precisely for us to be able to understand what your sort of like raw skills are and how do you compare it to other people that are applying, rather than how much money have you put into a coach to coach you. But yeah, so this is a bit of a tricky situation.
I'm interested now to take this game.
And you need to apply to McKinsey. You need to apply to McKinsey to play the game.
I'll see if there's an opening, or maybe our audience, you want to do that, you want to give it a try to McKinsey. So, well, Ary, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I've learned lots of things. So remember, you can connect with Ary online through LinkedIn. You can also connect to me. Remember, having a strong LinkedIn profile is part of professional development, and it's super useful to connect with other people, especially when we are in different parts of the world and otherwise we probably could have not met. So, well, thank you very much, Ary. This was great. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here today. I hope you found this very useful as myself. And thank you, Ary, so much for your time and everything you've shared with us.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice day.